Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Welcome back to Sela's Social Studies, chapter review time for chapter 7, which would be launching our nation. All right, so what are the first things that we get into when we're talking about launching our nation, right? The first thing we're talking about here is George Washington. Remember Washington, born in Virginia. He went to William and Mary to get a surveying certificate. He became a surveyor. He became part of the British Army in America during the 7 Years' War, lieutenant colonel. Remember, he kept losing all these battles. But when we're talking about launching our nation here, we're talking about the very popular George Washington, who becomes the first president of the United States, of the Federalist Party. You have to say Federalist. He wasn't really part of a party, but he was more of the Federalist Party than any of the anti-Federalist Party. Remember, he was so popular, all 11 electors voted for Washington. It was a unanimous decision. He was the man, and believe it or not, Washington was so popular, he probably could have been president until the day he died. However, he knew that he couldn't do that because that's what a monarchy did. They lived in power until they died, and we're like, hey, we just got rid of a monarchy. We don't want one anymore. All right, so George Washington, very popular, 11-0 when it comes to victory, and he becomes our first president. He knew he couldn't do everything by himself, so he had to create a cabinet, those people that were to help him. That's why he had the Secretary of Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of War, Henry Knox. What type of things go on during Washington's presidency? Well, the first thing we're going to talk about here is the Neutrality Proclamation. We just got out of war with Britain. Britain's fighting with France. France helped us beat Britain. See that little triangle there? You got U.S., Britain, and France. Now, what do we do with that? Washington says, well, if we help France, then we're going to get into another war with Britain. Can't happen. If we help Britain, then we're going to get into a war with France. Can't happen. So he says we're going to stay neutral. He gives a neutrality proclamation. We are going to stay out of any type of foreign wars. Why? Our army is too small. It's too weak. We don't have enough money. Britain kind of cut us off for trade after the Revolutionary War. So we have no money, a very small army. We're too weak to do anything about it. France helped us. We fought Britain. Now we're going to help Britain. Like, it's a whole big blah, blah, blah. It was just bad, right? So Washington says we're going to stay neutral. Now, this is a very popular decision amongst United States presidents because he sets the precedent, meaning something that he did, that future presidents will follow. He sets this precedent of staying neutral, and it works. It stays good. Stay out of European warfare until all the way in 1917 when we enter World War I. So the Neutrality Proclamation is successful. Stay neutral. Now it gets Hamilton and Jefferson have another reason to hate each other. You went over them already, but they have another reason to hate each other with this Neutrality Proclamation. And actually, Jefferson gets so mad that he leaves being Secretary of the State. What else happens under Washington? Well, you have the Whiskey Rebellion. Western Pennsylvania, you have farmers who are growing grains for whiskey. They're distilling whiskey. Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury, says, hey, Washington, we need a steady source of income. So what can we tax? We went to war because of no taxation without representation. So we went to war pretty much over taxes. The king just taxing us and taxing us and taxing us. Well, now we're like, well, now we need money. So how do we get money? We tax. Only two things guaranteed in life, death and taxes. So what are we going to tax? Let's tax the whiskey. A lot of guys like to drink out there in Western Pennsylvania and really all up and down the colonies or states at this time. So let's go ahead and tax whiskey. Well, these farmers get really upset at it. They rebel. They go attack a tax collector's house. They burn it down, tar and feather the guy. It's craziness, right? So now you have these tax collectors who are getting attacked. Well, Hamilton says, listen, George, we got to stop this. We got to stop this now. Otherwise, it's going to get really bad. You know, rebellions lead to takeovers of leadership. So Washington and Hamilton lead about 13,000 militia over the hills of Western Pennsylvania. And when these guys see this, they're like, boop, deuces, I'm out of here. Nobody wants to fight Washington and 13,000 militiamen. So Washington and Hamilton squash this Whiskey Rebellion. And unlike Shays' Rebellion, if you remember, Shays' Rebellion showed how the government was weak. The Whiskey Rebellion shows how the government is strong. The next thing we go under, let's see. Whoop, missed that. Neutrality Proclamation, Whiskey Rebellion. Judiciary Act of 1789. What does that do? It creates our court system, district court, circuit court, Supreme Court. Why did it have to be created? Well, because it was only sketched out in the Constitution. Here's a court system, do something with it. And we're like, I don't know. So the Judiciary Act of 1789 is important because it creates the three big court systems and it tells us how to use them. Foreign treaties. What happens in foreign treaties? We went over two. We went over Jay's Treaty and we went over Pinckney's Treaty. One very popular, one not very popular. One with Britain, one with Spain. Jay's Treaty was set up for failure to begin with. John Jay went over to England to go ahead and negotiate with the king a treaty, Jay's Treaty, and Hamilton set him up for failure. He's like, whatever John Jay says is a lie. Basically, that's what happened. So John Jay goes over there, tries to start throwing all these things out there, saying, we're going to help the Dutch against you, and blah, blah, blah. And the king's like, don't think so, right? So Jay's Treaty is unpopular. Jay's trying to be like, hey, stop impressing our sailors, right? Stop stealing our sailors, put them in your army. Get your people out of the forts in the Northwest Territory. And ultimately, that's kind of the only thing that happens, right? England kind of does get rid of their soldiers in the Northwest Territory. They don't stop impressing soldiers. And the other thing that they do is we become a favored trading nation with Britain. Jay's Treaty, super unpopular. People thought that we gave in to England. The next one is Pinckney's Treaty. If you remember correctly, America can only go to the Mississippi River. Well, we couldn't use the Mississippi River because Spain ixnayed that. They canceled it. So Pinckney goes down there. He creates a treaty with the Spanish king saying, hey, let us use the Mississippi River tax-free and the port of New Orleans, and let us resolve territorial disputes so Americans can keep moving westward. Americans love that. When they can use the river for trade and keep gaining more land, they loved it. So Pinckney's Treaty was very popular with Americans. Now you go through Washington. His farewell address says, stay away out of foreign affairs. You know, don't accrue too much debt. Washington was like a genius when he's going through this. John Adams, second president, Federalist, Washington's vice president, comes into office and is a complete kind of failure when it talks about, especially following what Washington did. So John Adams, the XYZ affair and quasi-war, probably the last two. Nope, that one right there. He has a problem with France. John Adams does not get along with France. France and John Adams like, now what does this mean? France is now impressing U.S. navalmen or merchants, capturing them and forcing them to work into their navy. So John Adams is like, dude, go over there, talk to the King of France or talk to the French diplomat and tell him to stop. So we send a couple of diplomats over to France. They get met by 3 agents that we named X, Y, and Z. And they go over there and they're like, hey, you want to talk to Talleyrand? You have to pay $250,000 and you need to give us a $10 million loan. So they're pretty much bribing us just to talk to the diplomat to be able to be like, hey, stop impressing our soldiers. Well, Eldridge Gerry, they come back from France, and they're like, hey, John Adams, listen to this garbage of what happened. They're trying to bribe us just to talk to this guy to make this happen. So John Adams is like, whoa, 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 posts it in the paper, gets really mad at France. This can't happen. So we go on undeclared warfare. This is why it's called a quasi-war. It's kind of a war, not a war. It's an undeclared naval warfare between France and the United States. Which ultimately ends, right? So he's having a problem with France, undeclared warfare. So how does John Adams fix the French problem? You see, French problem, what he feels is a French problem in the United States. He has the Alien and Sedition Acts. He passes these acts, which are totally unconstitutional, but he does it anyway. So they're meant to hurt French, of course, 100% French, but they're also hurt to hurt the Irish, but not as much. But he's going against the French. Now, what do these acts do? They raise nationalization times that people can get nationalized from 5 years to 14 years. Now you're an alien for 9 years longer. Detention or arresting of subjects of an enemy nation, which was, of course, France. So we could just arrest French people who were not naturalized or who were naturalized too. And authorize the president to expel any alien who he felt dangerous. If you were French, see ya. Right? So those are the Alien Acts. You totally can't do that. And to go on top of that and go even worse, he passes what we call the Sedition Act. And basically what that is on the freedom of speech. He's saying that you can't say anything bad or negative or print anything in the papers about the president or Congress in the United States. right? And otherwise you get thrown in jail. Now, there were some people who were thrown in jail for this. Oh, president stinks. Clink, clink. I'm in jail. Oh, my gosh. Right? So these are the type of things that were going on at launching our nation, with George Washington trying to stay neutral, trying to show him that, trying to show the country that we're strong now. We need to collect taxes. We are still having foreign problems with John Adams in France. Go back, play your quizzes, play your Kahoot. You will get an A on this test if you do all these reviews. Good luck.